Good morning. If I could call the meeting of the Santa Barbara County Board of Education to order, please, for our June 20th, 10 a.m. meeting. I would appreciate your attention. At this time, we're going to start the meeting with, we do have live simultaneous Spanish interpretation of the board meeting today for those who are viewing online. And now, Mr. Porter, if you would care to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, I would ask you to please rise. And please join me as we salute our nation and our community. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Porter. And we are having a dual meeting today here in Santa Maria, North County, and down at Cathedral Oaks in South County. So welcome to our cohorts, the other part of our board. Hi, morning. Hi, Anna, we miss you.
What about us?
Not so much.
Would you like to conduct the roll call, please?
Sure. Okay. Mrs. Alvarez Flores
Here.
Mrs. Cardy here. Mrs. DeWord here. Ms. Ehrman here. Mrs. Frost
Here.
Mr. Howell,
Here.
Mr. Porter.
And from the far north, President.
Thank you.
I don't believe we have any changes to the agenda today. And since we met just last Thursday, I don't have anything new to report. I'll start with those of you down at Cathedral Oaks. Do any of you want to make a comment this morning?
Nope.
You're speaking for the group?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
They said no off mic.
Oh, okay. And how about here in Santa Maria? No? All right. Then we will move right ahead to any public comments. We have no public here. Anna, no public there. All right, no public comments. Then we will move forward to our information item number 8, which is a summary of SBCEO's support for continuous improvement districts. And I would like to call upon our Associate Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction, Ellen Barger. Ellen, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. Just checking my mic. Everything's good. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you this information that has now become an annual event. And so the summary report is something that every county office does. And a little bit about the history and the purpose. A decade ago, we embarked upon our new state accountability system that had 4 parts that were rolled out in pieces. So the very first part that was rolled out was the LCAP, followed by the dashboard, and then differentiated assistance and the statewide system of support. And each of the years are on there. And then beginning in 2019, it became a requirement that the county office would provide a summary of planned support going forward to the CDE, and those will be compiled, and make it an information item at the same board meeting as the adoption of the budget and the LCAP. And so within that requirement, it comes from Ed Code 52006, and there are 3 goals involved in that. And so the 3 goals that are in our report that will go to the CDE are here. The first is about approving all the LCAPs, but it's really supporting the development, reviewing, and approving. Secondly, to provide technical assistance, which has become known as differentiated assistance. And then ultimately, the support for continuous improvement through level 1 differentiated assistance, through implementation of the LCAP, and through implementation of all of our district's plans. Beginning in the 25-26 cycle, there will be a fourth, and that is supports for special education. So I just thought I would give a little preview of that. So the way that I'm going to share with you today is with those goals in that order, and say a little bit about what we've done the past year and what the plans are going forward. So our first goal is about supporting, reviewing, and approving all of our LCAPs. And it brings to mind the fact that as county offices of education, we really have a dual role when it comes to LCAPs. One part of our role is our authority to approve the plans. But the other responsibility that comes with that authority is really an opportunity to support the planning, influence coherence, and really help all of our districts create excellent and equitable, aligned programmatic systems. So under the authority, there are 4 criteria that we use for approval. The first is using the template. The template encapsulates all of ed code, and it's not only the template as a piece of paper, but each of the instructions. Secondly, that our districts have sufficient budget to carry out all of those LCAP services. Third, that they meet the increased and improved services concept as it's laid out for our most vulnerable children. And then finally, the newest one that came into play several years ago was the calculation of their carryover obligation and integration of that carryover into the plan. So that's our criteria for when we get those LCAPs that we have to review. But the work starts well before that, because while we cannot require or disapprove any of our district's choices, the opportunity that we have to help them build their LCAPs throughout the year makes this a year-round process, but also helps in that coherence. So our LCAP team is quite big, and it includes both CNI, or what we call program people, and admin services, specifically from SBAS, that we call fiscal, because the LCAP is the integration of those two. So you can see how many of our folks are actually working on this, because we provide customized support and intensive support to all 20 districts and any of the charters who would like that support. And so LCAP support looking backward in 2023, I presented the same blocks to you last year, and I didn't just turn it into past tense verbs, but pretty much what we had planned to do is exactly what we do. So we start at the beginning of the summer when we received them and viewed, we clarified, and we approved all of last year's LCAPs by the date. And then in doing so, we analyzed not only what was in all of the LCAP and what it told us about what our district's needs were, but we knew that last summer was a big change in trailer bill, because it was the start. This year has been the start of a new LCAP template, as Bridget shared with the board last week. So we really analyzed those changes and the impact and began the LCAP cycle again, providing significant training based upon that analysis, but also based upon the new requirements. And so throughout fall and winter, we did a lot of training with the new template and requirements. The dashboard came out. We made the adjustments. This year, there was a requirement, and there is that requirement going forward, of a mid-year update. So we supported our districts through that and through the training on the templates. And then from January all the way, it's happening right now as our districts are scrambling to finish getting their LCAPs approved, is that training and customized support. And so, what does that entail? It entails building our capacity, building the districts and charters capacity, and then the support throughout. And so much of the work is customized and happens within the context of that district. I think something that's really helpful in understanding kind of where we are is the fact that this report comes each year in June at the end of the school year. Yet for both LCAP and what you'll see soon about the differentiated assistance, these are year-round cycles, and it kind of pops in a weird place in the cycle, so that we're looking backward and looking forward. So you can see that as of last year, what we shared was that in July through September of last year, we were doing the review, and then the new year comes and we start working on the development. So the approval and then the support are sort of marked by in between is this report. So we're looking back and looking forward. And so if we were to look at what does the cycle look like for next year, it would look exactly the same, but everywhere that it says 23 would say 24, and everywhere that says 24 would say 25. So this report kind of enters at the end of one cycle and starts anew. And so what does that LCAP support look like in 24, 25? Still the same cycle, but we're going to be into year 2. And so we will do the review, clarification, and approval all through the summer with the expectation that by August 15th, we will have, August 15th, we will have asked any of our districts for clarification. Our goal is to get every single one of these approved by the September 15th because districts have to have an approved LCAP to have their budgets approved. And then they all need to be posted in October. And so you can see that we'll start the new LCAP cycle again, but this new year, there will be fewer new requirements because we'll be in year 2 of this LCAP template and this LCAP cycle. There will be a couple of small things, and the mid-year update will continue. So that's kind of in a nutshell, all of the LCAP support and review, all done in 5 minutes. What's a year-long process? So next we'll go to the next goal, which is providing differentiated technical assistance. And once again, that is a year-round process. And there have been some changes to the process this year as well. So within providing the differentiated technical assistance, which we call differentiated assistance or DA, there's really 2 tiers of support. There's the universal supports that we provide for all of our districts and our charters. Some of those things include creating data folders with all of their data analysis, visual displays that they can use for their continuous improvement processes, as well as for their LCAPs. And then there's the second tier of support, which is called additional support for qualifying districts. So what makes that determination of what it means to qualify? That comes from the dashboard. And so this year, and when I say this year, the dashboard was released in December of 2023. So it's released each fall/winter from the previous year. And on the dashboard, this is the first time that we've had colors since 2019. Colors. What that means is the dashboard is a matrix of status and change, how well they're doing on a certain indicator and whether they've improved, fallen back, or stayed about the same. That maps to colors. And it's like a heat map where blue is the best, way above expectation, and red is sort of, there's, it's red flag, warning. And so it's when a district has 2 full priorities in red for a student group, they qualify for this differentiated assistance. And so, so this year we had 10 districts and 1 charter qualify for this additional support. And so when we provided, as we started providing this year, I'll talk about in a minute, is also there's a collective piece and an individual piece, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And so this is just a picture of all that I just said about the levels of support. So level 1 is support for all, and level 2 is the differentiated assistance. There is no district in the state of California that has made it to level 3. We don't even know what the criteria are yet for level 3 for intensive intervention. And the picture on the right is just to show how the statewide system of support centers the individual district or charter school with the wraparound services of the county office, bringing in additional layers of support. And so what we're going to talk about is the level 2 supports. And so, as I said, we had 10 districts and 1 charter qualify. This was the first year that charters could qualify for differentiated assistance, and we had just 1. In the past, they haven't. And so of those 10 districts, 7 continued, but they weren't necessarily qualifying for the exact same student groups or the exact same priorities and indicators. And then we had 4 that were new to the process. Obviously, the new the charter was the first. And then we had 1 that qualified because of a technical element. And then the other 2 were new this year. And one of the things that changed this year also is that it was always a problem that we would get the dashboard in December, then get together with the districts, and the support was supposed to be for a year, but we were usually just getting started. So now in the statute for the districts, not for the charters and not for the district that qualified because of a technicality, they get 2 years of support from the time that they qualify. And so that would mean at least until the dashboard of 2025. And so within our differentiated technical assistant, these are our overarching goals. We want the support to not be ad hoc and not just reactionary, but comprehensive, coherent support that lives within the district and all of the systems that they are working on. As we said, it's customized, it's individualized, and it's a long-term approach because at its heart is understanding systems change and understanding continuous improvement, not just making surface level changes. Also, one of the things that we've noticed is that the differentiated assistance, as we have looked at our districts' results over years, is that there's both some individual areas of focus for each district or charter, but there's also been this collective area of focus and need. And what that is around students with disabilities. We've noticed not just during the pandemic, but it was exacerbated during the pandemic. So as the results started to come out, first last year with the first dashboard, and then this new year, we recognized that there was a need. So last winter, spring, Superintendent Salcido brought in myself and our SELPA Executive Director, Dr. Ray Avila, because we wanted to talk to the superintendents about some collective impact and how, if we have a common issue, how we might work on it together. And so what we formed in fall was our Santa Barbara County Inclusion Network, focused on the work and the root causes of why our students with disabilities are not having the kinds of outcomes that they should. And so what it looked like this year was 3 full-day team in-person meetings with all kinds of asynchronous work, plan support, and feedback living within those plans, and followed up by consultancies in the spring. And so what were those 3 meetings? They really were around 3 things: culture, practice, and policy. And each one of those meetings really focused in with the districts working together as teams with the support of one of our, actually 2 of our system of support leads. And you'll see up in the upper left-hand corner, it says SIP. That is the Supporting Inclusive Practices, which is one of the statewide agencies and systems of support. We also had the Special Education Systems Improvement Leads. And so all of this work really guided together in each and every district or charter that was part of this is continuing this work and implementing it with their differentiated assistance. We had some that were not qualified for differentiated assistance that still wanted to be a part of this. And so they are working on this as well, because this is something that is universal, whether or not a district qualified. And there, it was such a success that now going forward, that collective part is going to continue. So we rebuilt or continued the plans for 24-25 with the group that was already with us, but we've also created a space, what we're calling a boot camp, for those that have heard about it and want to be part of it. This work also made its way through Curriculum Council, through LCAPS, and so it's really exciting that we have continued support. I also just want to take a moment to mention that our network that we've created and this work that we've done is now the prototype for the state, and it's being taken out into multiple other regions and within our own geographical region here. Okay, so that that's kind of like what we did on the collective level. Here's the individual part. We co-create. We've done it in the past and we continue to do it. In fact, I just left a DA meeting to come here. We co-create with the superintendent and their choice of who their core team is as we're doing this differentiated work. It always starts with customized data exploration, even when a district is returning, because their data has changed. So we look at historical landscape, we look at trends, the local contexts and need around the areas of academic outcomes, climate, and pupil engagement. Through the process, there's so much meaning making, and it's quite iterative because each data analysis leads to further data inquiry, to setting priorities, and doing some of the continuous improvement work. The other thing I think is really important to understand is how this differentiated technical assistance, when I say it's got long-term, it has long-term and short-term, but what I have up here is an iceberg diagram. And so many of us have seen the iceberg diagram that at what's above the water, what's above the level is really just sort of the symptoms. And that's what comes through in the data. Our dashboard data is a canary in the coal mine that tells us what's happening. But if you look just below that surface at the data that we create for them is the patterns and the trends. But differentiated assistance is not just technical, it's also human, and it's also embodied within systems. And so that's where we look at the structures and the processes that are below the surface. And those kind of live in what we call artifacts, which can be policies, practices, use of time, physical artifacts of curriculum, of systems, and the mental models that are mutually reinforcing. And so a big part of our work, not only in the inclusion network, but in our work around differentiated assistance kind of builds on this cultural pyramid that you see here. And this comes from Culture Partners. What we often look at the tip, or, at the top of that pyramid or atop of that iceberg, is the results. And so the results that you see on the left have to do with the current results. But then we have desired results. What the work around the culture and the policies and the mindsets and the mental models says is that if you try to get new results on the old culture, it's not going to work. And so part of this work is examining the actions, the beliefs, and the experiences, and asking what needs to change in those in order to get the results together. And so that has been a piece that has really resonated with the long-term work. So not only is our differentiated assistance informed by that, the purpose, strategy, and culture, as well as the data inquiry, but those are just some of the other areas that our differentiated assistance team is deeply, deeply trained and works within, and all of that creation of the work that we do. Because what we know is that for differentiated assistance, not only is that culture and the results, all of those elements, a part of it, but as I said earlier, it's grounded in continuous improvement, learning how to get better at getting better, but it also lives within a very complex system in each district. And so differentiated assistance lives at the intersection of strategic planning, constant new legislative initiatives, pre-existing local initiatives, and our own accountability system has the LCAP for state, but there's also federal accountability, and our special education accountability is called compliance and improvement monitoring. So we've been really working together with our SELPA, with our districts, with all that's happening to make sure that differentiated assistance is coherent and lives within that and isn't siloed and ad hoc. And so we have an incredible differentiated assistance team. Everyone you see above the line is kind of fully focused on and part of every one of those teams where it's appropriate. And then we pull in other of our directors who are either working deeply in an area that a district is working on, or already working deeply within that district and knows that district well to create that coherence. And so that's goal 1, goal 2, and goal 3 is how do we support that continuous improvement of plan implementation throughout the year, not just in the creation of it. And so we have so many universal supports that we provide everyone, and that we might provide to a greater intensity for our districts, or we could provide them, other things altogether. So from the dashboard and the data, we really know that many of our districts do not have data people. So data displays, visuals, toolkits, resources, things that help them engage their educational partners, speak to their boards, develop their plans, and engage everyone in the analysis. We have some continuing areas of focus that you see there that we've pulled from not only our DA work, but from the LCAPs as well. And then we have some anticipated areas of amplification for the upcoming school year because of changes in policy or in the cycles. For example, the math, science, and computer science statewide initiative. More and more, our districts are needing and recognizing that they have to reestablish their PLCs, their professional learning communities, because of the number of new teachers, the impact of new research and new technologies, as well as changes to the professional standards and some of the other frameworks that undergird their work. And so the support structure comes in many ways. We have our curriculum council. We have other existing networks. The curriculum council is a network. We have networks at every altitude within the system. We have existing and we'll have expanding communities of practice. Another thing that we've done that we don't talk about a lot is that there have been tons of monies in the past several years, and we do the grant administration on behalf of our districts and sometimes push out those monies, sometimes help them develop those plans, or just provide the services directly. So we continue to do that. We have workshops, some very customized contract work that is offset. We provide opportunities for mini grants and just a lot of the existing program integration. What I mean by that is we serve all the new teachers. We serve all of the administrators clearing their credentials. We serve a lot of new people want to become administrators through our credential programs. And so we incorporate the district's LCAPs and their differentiated assistance in all of that. And so the other part of the report that we send is just about our collaboration with the CDE and the California Department of Education and the CCEE, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, that oversees that statewide system of support that continues growing. We have been leveraging these different elements of the statewide system of support and integrating those resources and that expertise into the work that we do with our districts. And this is just an example of that. This is an artifact from our inclusion network, where we had 9 of the statewide systems of support leads in breakout sessions with our districts to build within their folders and within their work. And so that takes us to our 3 goals: support, review, and approve all LCAPs, provide differentiated technical assistance, and then that ongoing continuous support at all levels through plan implementation. We will send our report to the CDE, and that CDE includes goals, indicators, metrics, and actions that we take. So with all of that, I will say thank you for being interested in this work that we do and for allowing me to share a little bit of the invisible work that we do that really helps our districts to develop meaningful and equitable programs. And I'll pause for questions.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you very much. Would you clarify one point for me? And I know a couple of board members here have questions, and maybe some of the ones down in South County do as well. But is this the actual summary report, or this is a presentation of what's in the summary report?
It's a presentation of what's in the summary report. The summary report that we send is in an optional template that most of the county offices have agreed to use, so that the CDE has a requirement that they have to compile certain parts of it into one full-on report. So the report that we send to them is specific to that organization and to that structure that will help them put it all together with all the other 57 counties. And so that the actual report is a separate document that will go with our LCAP to the CDE once our LCAP is adopted, and will then be posted at the California Department of Education.
And there's no requirement for the boards of the counties to approve that.
No,
addendum.
That's correct. It's
yeah,
an
it's not
information
an
item.
action item.
Mhm.
It's just
Okay.
information.
All right, Michelle? I think you had a question.
Yes, thank you. Good
Yeah.
morning, Ellen. Thank you so much for this roadmap, and it's so organized, and I appreciate how easy it is to understand the three goals. The question I have is on goal number 2, we have 10 school districts and 1 charter school that receive these services from our county office. Do these school districts and charter school have the opportunity to evaluate the wraparound services of the county office? So we can kind of compile data and see how, just ongoing feedback from the districts to help our team understand where we're effective and where we may need more support, or support how
So-
we can support them better.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's really in multiple parts. So part of our own process includes asking for that feedback. Also, last year it was in statute. Well, now it's a full 2 years ago. It was in statute that there was a study done by, it was given to Wested to do, where they did around differentiated assistance in general. And then the third is we are doing that as county offices. We're in the process of a for us by us process that we're also doing to find out the effectiveness of that. There's also another element that is this year where the districts in the new LCAP, if they qualify for differentiated assistance, they have to give a summary of their differentiated assistance. But we are constantly collecting the feedback because it's not something we do to our districts, it's something we do along with our districts.
Ellen, thank you. This is a really critical way that we can support our districts. So thank you for your team doing that. My question would be, so every student cohort has its own characteristics, pluses and minuses. And so the performance of students in any district is going to ebb and flow over time. And then, of course, COVID firebombed the entire process. So it's hard to see continuity of data over time. Given the difficulty of looking through all that fog, do we have some districts who have been in need of differentiated assistance for year after year after year after year and always seem to be stuck doing this? Or does it really kind of checkerboard all over the place?
I think that's a great question because what qualifies and doesn't qualify can sometimes be one event. I'll give an example. We could have a district that has red in chronic absenteeism, and then because it's a small school district and they had one event where 5 kids were suspended because they had to be suspended, it can move their suspension from green to red in a year by that number. And they can qualify because of that. And that's why I say we're not just reactive to those indicators, but to your point, that's also why we look at data over time and we look at data trends. So to the point that you've brought up, a universal need in our county, but also in the state, has been the way in which we're serving students with disability. We all need assistance in that. There's also been some other themes coming into and out of COVID. But to your point, in some places, the students and the indicators change like this. Some stay consistent. And so that really does color the way that we talk to the districts and work alongside them to help ask questions so that they can focus where they want to put their energies and their focus over time. Because there's both the real needs and it's learning how to make improvements, how to analyze data now that we have more than ever, and then how to take those improvements to scale within a district and sustain it. So I really appreciate those questions because the answer is, when you asked me, is it this or this? Yes, it's both, and in some districts it's both, but in some districts it's more of one and some it's more of the other. Thank you for that question.
Head around all of this. I kind of backwards map first. So I'm looking at the outcome already to kind of see initially how the steps happen. So again, thank you for the reports. Very interesting. I know there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Thank you.
I'm glad we're doing it. Thank you.
All right, any of our board members at Cathedral Oaks have questions or comments they would like to make? Nadra?
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen, so much for this presentation. I'm always continually impressed with the work that everyone does at the office, and not just the expertise, but also the care and the comprehensive intentionality behind these programs. So, and then also just highlighting a couple of items that really stuck out to me is the inclusion network, and how that is becoming a prototype for the state is a great accomplishment. And then looking at the systems iceberg, mental processes and artifacts, and how important that is to the process. There's the statement trash in, trash out, or and better context, treasure in, treasure out. So, looking at how those inputs are affecting those outputs and outcomes is so important to the process. So thank you for just being very intentional with that in this process. And then my question specifically, so it would seem that when you have the differentiated assistance, that all of, at least in this recently, all of the schools or districts are taking advantage of that. Is there ever a case where districts do not take advantage of the assistance if they qualify?
I really appreciate that question. And we have had that instance where it hasn't been an outright refusal, but maybe not as easy to schedule with them and haven't taken full advantage. And that's why I believe that the new requirement to actually write about, because we are required to provide it, but there hasn't been teeth that they are required to take it, and so now in their LCAPs, that's where they have to make it clear what they are doing and give a summary about what their focus areas are. So, yeah, I appreciate that question.
Yeah, no problem. And just one follow-up question. With the universal support, do you ever find that you have districts that don't take advantage of that support as well? And
Well, that's why we offer it through so many different mechanisms. And so they can't always come to our communities of practice and to our networks because they have few people sometimes. So we always make sure we bring it to them. We don't specify how they use it, but we interact and provide support for every single one of our districts and almost all of our charter schools. There's one or two that don't necessarily, but we still give it to them and they say thank you, and we just don't know how they use those supports. But we have multiple ways of giving that offering.
That's Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Congratulations to your all-star team. We can see why you
Thank you.
need so many players to do this work. This is a really sound structure. It's logical, it's replicable, it's accountable. So many moving targets. And then
Yes.
templates change and requirements change, and then leadership changes across our
Yes.
county. And in the 20 districts that we serve, 10 qualify for differentiated assistance. For context purposes, is that about average? In other county
You know,
offices of ed?
it's been average these last 2 years because of the structure of things like chronic absenteeism. And chronic absenteeism was for many districts, because remember, this dashboard that this is based on was the 22-23 school years dashboard, where we still had significant chronic absenteeism. So in the counties that have a lot of elementary districts, because chronic absenteeism is an indicator only in elementary, not in high school, because of the federal, I don't want to get wonky on you.
But you could.
But I could, and I would bore you to tears. But we have been seeing that also a small school districts that are in that sweet spot, often a very small change can change the nature of their dashboard significantly. And so just as easily, they could show up and not qualify following year.
Right. So they move in and out. And of the 7 that are continuing,
Mhm.
of those 7, has there been, this is kind of tagging on to Bruce's point,
Yeah.
have they been in this DA system for more than a couple of years? I just,
So
again,
yeah, we have a
context.
few that have been at least 3 years
Mhm.
of of the 6 that it's been available, because from 2019 until last year, it was the same group. So we're not counting each of those years that they stayed in. And the reason that it didn't change was because we didn't have a dashboard.
Right.
Um, but as we've said, there have been changes, but you started your question with a really important piece for a couple of the school districts that continue, and they have had a lot of changes in their leadership, and so working with us, but also unraveling a lot of other things that come with change. Also, just anecdotally, we were just on a call, after doing some work with a district. We were doing the follow up, and they were giving feedback and reflections of what they saw. And they had this aha and they had all of their principals, all of their administrators there. And they were laying out the statistics of how many of them were in their first year, second year, third year, and fourth year. So it's an ongoing work, because while the district might be the same, the humans are different.
Well, thanks for being that North Star for all things LCAP related. What a huge comfort it must be, especially to the really small districts, well, to the large ones as well, just trying to negotiate all of this.
It's a lot that they have
Lot.
to do.
Any more questions? Hearing none, I want to extend the board's appreciation and thanks, Ellen, to you and your staff and every person who's a part of this curriculum and instructional work. So thank you very much. And we'll see you again many times. Bye-bye. Okay. We'll now move on to information item number 9, the LCAP Local Indicators Report. And I think, Bridget, would you like to say something about this item?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I have a short presentation related to the local indicators, and Ellen always does such a beautiful job in setting this up a little bit as it relates to the dashboard. And so it turns our focus back to our internal programs and where they are with dashboard results as related to local indicators. So go ahead and. So just to begin, I have a definition here of what is a local indicator. And the local control funding formula defines a local indicator as priorities where data is not collected at the state level, but instead is based on locally collected data that the LEA will use to measure and report on through the dashboard. This next slide is a table in which it identifies the priority areas. There are 8 identified state priority areas for districts, and there are 10 for county offices of education. Related to those priority areas, there are 5 state indicators that are either measured by statewide assessments or data that is put into the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, or what we refer to as CalPADS. And there are 5 local indicators identified for districts and 7 for county offices of education, which again are based on local data. You may be wondering, how are these 3 columns or identified areas connected to the LCAP? So the 8 priority areas are reflected in the LCAP goals. So for example, in our LCAP this year, LCAP goal 1 targeted priority areas 2, 4, 7, and 8. And as you look through the LCAP, you will see that each goal identifies priority areas in which it's focused on. Additionally, both the state and local indicators are reflected in our LCAP metrics and are annually reported on the dashboard. The state board has identified local indicators and developed instruments for which the LEA uses to measure and report progress on each of the appropriate priority areas. This process is that districts and county offices rate themselves on these local indicators by going through a process reflectively and honestly. So for our programs, we conducted self-assessments with both the JCCS leadership team as well as the transitional youth services team. And the self-assessment ratings and narratives are included in the board packet as your informational item. So you have all of that information. A district and a COE the state has determined that we have met every local standard if we do 3 items. Basically, we need to annually measure our progress. Secondly, we need to report the results of our progress at a regularly scheduled board meeting. At which the LCAP is adopted. That's why this is being presented today. And then finally, we report those results publicly through the release of the dashboard. As Ellen mentioned, that usually is published in the fall or winter annually. How do we go about collecting this information? This is just basically a timeline that I wanted to share with you. Typically, January to June, we start collecting information that we'll use to annually measure our progress. And then before July 1st, we present this information to the board along with the LCAP adoption. Then we report it through a system online to the dashboard, which then is published in the fall or winter. Again, we have met the criteria for a local indicator by going through those 3 steps. So based on this criteria, our programs here at SBCEO have met each of the 7 indicators for county offices. And basically that is all. It's a very short presentation today. Sorry, I got tripped up. I had an extra slide in my presentation. Any questions that you may have related to the document or the presentation related to local indicators?
We'll start with those of you at Cathedral Oaks. Any questions, comments?
I'm seeing no, Judy.
Okay, then I'll turn to my cohorts here. No, Rita? No. Bridget, thank you very much for your presentation. And
Thank you.
we appreciate the work you and your staff do on LCAP.
Thank you so kindly.
Okay, you have an information item number 10, which is the federal addendum. And we don't have a presentation per se. There's an attachment that was provided. Are there any questions? Does the board have any questions about the federal addendum? Seeing no hands going up, I will move forward to our action items then. Number 11. Last week, we went through the LCAP. It was presented and we had a public hearing. And at this time, the superintendent has recommended adoption of the Santa Barbara County Education Office 24 through 27 LCAP. I'll need a motion, please,
I'll make that motion.
and a second.
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 All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. I guess I didn't do discussion, but we can do it now. Discussion, comments? Yes,
I
Michelle.
wanted to thank Renee and Susan for getting those 5 critical areas that they're focused on. I appreciate that information.
Okay, then move on to item number 12. The Board Budget Committee recommends the adoption of the 24-25 County School Service Fund budget. The county superintendent has certified that the budget has been reviewed utilizing state adopted criteria and standards. This was presented again last week and in detail, and we also had a public hearing on it at that time. We had a question on lottery, I think it was, from Mr. Porter. And I believe, Steve, you have some information for us?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Yeah, so just a quick update on the lottery funds. I think we gave you an estimate last week. That was kind of actually looking at our reserve funds of our lottery. So on an annual basis, we get around 25 to 30,000 in unrestricted lottery funds, and then we get about 6,000 to 7,000 in restricted lottery funds. So there's a portion that's restricted for instruction material. So you mentioned, is it in the hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands? It's in that 20 to 30,000 range.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. On a regular board, a local board, people ask me all the time why we always needed money. Didn't the lottery give us millions and millions and millions of dollars? And so I probably got that question more than any other. And so I think it's great to have all the board members kind of know what that number looks like when that's brought up.
Yeah, and I'll just add one other thing. One of the items that we look at is kind of having that data as trend data for that and other various funds or grant amounts and things like that. So that's something we look at to present at a future time, just so you can see over the course of the years what that amount looks like. It doesn't vary much, but probably good information to have.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate it.
Not a big number.
Not all.
Teeny tiny number. If that. All right, at this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt the 24-25 service fund budget.
I so move.
Do I have a second?
A second.
And do we have any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, lucky number 13. I mentioned this as in the closing remarks I made last week, that this would be coming forward today. It's something that we haven't seen before. And it's a recommendation for us to adopt the resolution that makes it possible for us to file for federal financial assistance or state financial assistance due to emergencies, declared emergencies. It's universal and it's open for all and future disasters up to 3 years from the approval date. So we're basically wanting to put this on file. And Susan, would you like to add anything else and then see if the board has any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a universal resolution that the LEAs do seek. However, I will add that we do have damages at the Cathedral Oaks property due to the rains that occurred in winter 2023-24. And so we'd like to seek the adoption so that we can then seek remuneration for that. Thank you.
At this time, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Questions from the board?
I have a quick question. I just, is this a, adoption that is pretty routine annually? And that we do happen to have damage, so we are, asking for it, but is it something that we just do as a, for lack of a better word, formality, just so that we have the funds available if we need it?
That's accurate, I would say. And we won't need to bring it back annually because it's a 3-year, it spans a 3-year period, but it technically could come back in 3 years for another 3-year period if FEMA doesn't change their required resolution form.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And this item, since it's a resolution, requires a roll call vote. Anna?
Okay, Mrs. Alvarez Flores,
Aye.
Mrs. Cardy,
Aye.
Mrs. DeWord,
Aye.
Ms. Ehrman,
Aye.
Mrs. Frost,
Aye.
Mr. Howell,
Aye.
Mr. Porter.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion passes.
All right, item number 14 is recommended approval of the 23-24 Proposition 28 Arts and Music School Funding Annual Report. And there was an attachment in our board book having to do with this. And I believe, Susan, we may ask you for a little bit more information.
Be my pleasure to give you some information. So the California voters approved Proposition 28 for arts and music in schools in 2022. And SBCEO is receiving an allocation for arts based on our ADA in juvenile court and community schools, special education, and our early care and education. We received the amount in 2023, but we were waiting to hear on a special piece, which is a waiver. And let me explain that waiver. The allocation, by the way, is about $132,000 total. We intend to spend it on the arts in those programs. It is just so that you have the amounts per category. Slightly over 5,000 for JCCS, slightly over 45,000 for early care and education, and slightly over 82,000 for special education. So we intend to spend it. We have 3 years to spend those funds. But with Prop 28, there's a requirement that 80% of your allocation is used to hire a new certificated or classified staff to provide those arts and music in programs. And the state allowed for a waiver to say you may waive that requirement and provide it in a different way. We would like to entertain using the Children's Creative Project resource that we have to provide artists in residence and very creative ways to support the programs. So we're seeking that waiver. That waiver, the parameters of the waiver didn't actually get publicized until about April or May of this year. So we were holding on to knowing the allocation, but also not wanting to spend it without knowing how we can spend it and get the permissions. And so we put in for a waiver, and we haven't heard back yet. At the same time, there's a requirement to report to the board our expenditures. So you see the report to the board says 0. It is still required, even though we have not spent any of the funds. And in the future, we'll come back to the board to provide a report on how we are planning and actually have spent the funds. So it's a new requirement for all LEAs. We do require that the report goes before the board before, I believe, the end of July. And so that's what is before you. Can I answer any questions for you? Yes, Michelle.
Do we offer art and music in our classes currently?
We do. In
Okay.
fact, I believe Bridget and Renee and Amy in their report last week to the board on juvenile court and community schools, they were talking about the music programs and different programs that we're providing. This is going to be, I think, enhance it. It's a wonderful opportunity. I'm really looking forward to. I know you all are too. But it will be in addition to it. But I think it's a wonderful partnership to have a children's creative project. They have such I want to call it a portal to resources of people who can provide great opportunities for our students. So there are some now, but there'll be even more in the future. Great question. Thank you.
Any questions from Cathedral Oaks Group? No? Then at this time, I will call for a motion to approve.
Move approve. Oh, go ahead. Second.
Who firsted it? Joe
I'll
just
move.
seconded. There you
I'll
go.
move.
Okay, we
I
got
think
two
we were
now.
competing for the microphone at the same time.
Okay, I think it was Nadra and Joe.
Yeah.
All right. Any further discussion, comments, questions? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I now would like to call for a motion for adjournment to our next meeting, which will be on August 8th in Santa Barbara at 2:00. May I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
And a second?
I second.
Discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.